everyone. Thank you all very much for coming. We have a very interesting session this afternoon with three winemakers from different parts of California, different sizes of winery, just very different approaches as well, I think. And we're grateful for this through Castle No Wine Agencies, who work with a number of Californian producers, including the three who are here today, and the California Wine Institute, which approached Castle No to run initially seminars, webinars for sommeliers, but this one's been broadened out to include circle members. So over to Keith Isaacs, who's the general manager of Castle No, who will introduce the individual speakers and tell us all a bit more about what's going to go on. Thank you.
Liz, thank you very much. I would just say that we were one of a number of importers who the California Wine Institute have been working with. But this is the second session that we've done under their auspices. And as I said, for those of you not in the UK, we're the UK importers of these three particular wineries. Just to set the scene, why Cabernet Sauvignon? Firstly, it's the most widely planted red variety in California. It's the main ingredient in many of California's most expensive and highly regarded wines. And its importance reflected in the virtual six-fold increase in the amount of Cabernet being crushed each year from 1990 through to 2019. And by way of background, it's planted mainly in the warmer quality areas. Now, some of the speakers might take issue with that. So north of the Bay Area, Napa and Sonoma, south of the Bay Area, predominantly San Luis Obispo County, so think of Paso Robles. And then the other main area would be east and southeast of the Bay Area, Lodi, San Joaquin area. The questions that we've asked the panelists to address are how they grow their Cabernet, how they vinify it, how they blend it, how they age it, and also why. And the three panelists will be talking in the following order. First, Adam from Wine Hooligans, whose Cabernet is made under a California appellation. Then Megan McCullough, who's the winemaker at Hahn Winery, responsible for the Smith and Hook wines, so Central Coast appellation. And then Robert Donnell, who makes the wine called Trail 3150. When I said it was from a tiny single vineyard, he took issue with me earlier. It's from a very small vineyard in a medium-sized sub-AVA of Napa called Oak Knoll. And he makes that wine and some other wines as well. Each winemaker will introduce him or herself and produce some stunning insights into Californian Cabernet. And the best person to start for stunning insights is Adam, and I can say that because I've tasted wine and beer with him for about 15 years on and off, so I can be as rude as I like about Adam. So over to Adam. Tell us about the wine you're making in Wine Hooligans.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Keith. Hello, everybody. I apologize. I was looking for a vineyard picture for my background. I couldn't find one, so I chose a superhero. I hope that's okay. We put together a little PowerPoint presentation for you. I'm not going to cover everything on the PowerPoint, but I thought if you guys needed anything later on down the road, they have this over at the Castle Now offices. So I'm going to go ahead and share this with you. By the way, I just want to apologize. It's my first time ever doing a PowerPoint presentation online. So this is me. I grew up in upstate New York. Was in the military for a long time. Went to Fresno State University where I got my degree in enology. And I've been making wine now for nearly 30 years. I've primarily on the Central Coast. Have worked in Chile. I've made wine in Spain. I'll have a bunch of projects up in Napa and Sonoma and Oregon also, but really what we're talking about today is Seiko's Gladiator. It's a California appellated wine. I live in Paso Robles, which is on the Central Coast, and it's home to a number of vineyards that we get to work with. At one point, I was actually at Hana States Winery, where I was a vice president of winemaking, where I had met Keith and Kent, for that matter. So let's talk about the wine. I know we're limited. There we go. So Seiko's Gladiator The wine was founded in 2005. This was as a replacement when we were up at Hana States. This is a replacement for a very popular brand called Rex Goliath that we had created back in 2002. That blew up to about 500,000 cases within 2 years. We sold the brand to Constellation, and then Seiko's Gladiator. We followed up Rex Goliath with Seiko's Gladiator. Now, Seiko's Gladiator originally was primarily a Central Coast wine. We had up at Hana States, and you'll learn more about this later from one of my colleagues. But we had an awful lot of vineyards and not enough bottled product for all of the grapes. We contracted a lot of fruit down in Paso Robles. So Seiko's Gladiator started off like that. It's an old 1890s bicycle poster from the Gladiator Bicycle Company in Paris, France. And it's one of about 150 companies at the time. And all of them had these big, beautiful adverts, this Belle Epoque era things with women in various stages of undress, or just with a big grin on their face, riding a bicycle with a baguette in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. And it was really about the time that Susan B. Anthony had come through Europe on her World Suffragette tour, had declared the bicycle as the greatest contribution to women's liberation. And because it obviously allowed a woman to get out of the house, meet with friends, get a job, a number of things. But being a cause-based winery at the time, Hana States, we really latched onto the concept of this label and what it meant for a lot of the things that we supported, a lot of the causes we supported. So that's how the brand came about. In 2014, a new startup company that I work for now called the Wine Hooligans purchased Seiko's Gladiator from Hana States. I'm the director of winemaking for the Wine Hooligans. And so I have my old brand back, which is great. It spent about 2 years as a Central Coast wine, and we've moved it back out to California to take advantage of a lot of the other grapes and vineyards that I get to work with around Mendocino, Lake County, Sonoma, Lodi, Clarksburg, Santa Barbara, Monterey. So I just like that flexibility of being able to blend. So the wine is in the UK right now. It's a 2017 Cabernet Sauvignon. For this particular vintage, we chose Paso Robles, Lodi, and Mendocino as the sources for this this blend. Now, I just want to point out that the blend does not stay the same every year. Nor do the Vineyard Sources. Again, I work with probably about 30 different vineyards. Out of Paso Robles, we have a large vineyard that I work out of. Sabellum Ranches, Truesdale Vineyard. It's about 10 minutes to the east of me out of Paso Robles, where we get most of our Cabernet for a couple of our programs. And I use wine. That's the one thing that I do have as a constant is I use this particular wine, this particular vineyard as a source for my Cabernet and for my Merlot and for our Chardonnay. And so I will often blend other varieties into it, Merlot, Petit Verdot. I just love to blend. And for me, every particular vintage, there will be a strong point there'll be a strength to the wine, and there'll be a weakness to the wine. And so for me, the concept of blending is about filling all the holes, making it a more full-bodied. I use Merlot and Petit Verdot, in fact, to make Cabernet taste more like a Cabernet. My benchmark for me, obviously, would be Napa, Alexander Valley in California, obviously the Bordeaux region of France. So oftentimes the Cabernet that I work with might be a little too fruit-driven. And so I'll often use Merlot to actually flesh out the mid palate, and Petit Verdot, of course, is a great blender for finishing up the wine, stretching out the tannins. But again, so Paso is the primary source for the grapes. We have 2 vineyards, one in Clarksburg, one in Lodi I work with, and a couple of big vineyards up in Mendocino that produce really fantastic Cabernet. The Lodi portion is always this big, fat, fleshy monster of a wine. And I'll use that to beef up the mid palate a little bit. So that's my philosophy for making this wine. And let me go a little deeper here. So I wanted to just briefly touch on California Cab. We got some scan data yesterday, try to show you where we are in the United States with Cabernet. And All of this data is available for you again afterwards if you're interested. But you can see as a 70% of all still wine sold in a 750 format in the United States is Cabernet Sauvignon. 25% of all still wine sold at 11 and above is Cab, and 30% of all luxury and super luxury wines, 25% and above, as you can see, are Cabernet. So Cabernet is king. Hasn't been replaced yet by Pinot Noir. I don't know, Kent, if you wanted to touch on this. Well, no, I'll do it. So California Cabs are still king for global sales. It has lost some ground to Pinot Noir. That has been a trend that we've been seeing ever since that stupid movie Sideways. Just Pinot has never, we thought it might be something of a temporary thing, but Pinot has never given up ground at all. It just keeps growing and growing, and it's kind of tapered off over the last couple of years. Cabernet, though, is still being planted pretty drastically. A lot of new vineyards going into the ground, because at the end of the day, everything is still, all red wines wish they were Cabernet here in the United States. So let's see, what else? Here's some information about the other SKUs that we do. We do a Chardonnay, we do a Merlot, which is probably my favorite wine that I work with. It's probably the one that we sell the least of, just because it's Merlot. Cabernet, Pinot Noir, Petit Syrah, and then we have a Cannes Noir, which has done really, really well for us. And I just wanted to point out one of the things that we've done. Anna, who is on with us today, who's our director of marketing, had this great idea as far as celebrating the 100th anniversary of the women's right to vote in the United States. And so we sponsored, just like we used to do in the Han days, we sponsored this really cool project that she spearheaded about funding a bunch of public art in the state of Tennessee, which was the last state to ratify the amendment in the Constitution that allowed women the right to vote. So it's pretty impressive stuff anyway, but that's my presentation. I know I had 10 minutes. I hope I didn't go over, Keith.
No, that's fine. Thank you, Adam. I know there's one question that the labeling has created a few questions, Adam.
Sure.
And where's my chat gone? There we go. Sorry.
As Belinda put on the answer I saw pop up, the label did manage to get itself banned in Alabama, which was a great piece of publicity for the wine.
We couldn't have paid. We couldn't have paid for that.
It was used on advertising posters quite widely. It probably didn't do much for tourism in Alabama, but it's quite a catchy line, and it was used quite widely. Apart from that, I don't know of any issues with the branding and the image. It has got bigger and smaller over the last few years, but it's now back to its glorious Technicolor original poster and looks much the better for it.
Right.
Adam, have you seen the question on the chat? There's one there from Meg.
Yeah, Meg was saying, are you reconsidering label art in light of the hashtag #MeToo and other cultural progress?
No, we're not. Actually, I'm reading the chat right now. Actually, the label art is a celebration of women, and it was representative of women's suffragette movement. And I think it's actually, in our eyes, it supports the Me Too movement in many regards. It's not meant to be anything other than just a celebration of women's freedom. So I hope that answers it. But I think I don't think it's as, back in 2005 when the state of Alabama had banned the label, and there were parts of Ontario and Canada also, and a few key accounts which actually had us pull the wine out of their stores, but those were all in the Bible Belt, and everyone else seemed to have really embraced it and what it stood for. And I don't think there's any I certainly haven't heard anything regarding the label art as being an issue at this point in time.
Okay, I think we should probably move on to the second speaker now, keep an eye on time.
Yeah.
We can have a more general Q&A at the end if there's a bit of time left. Can we go over to Megan, please?
I sure hope so. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the presentation, Adam. That was quite lovely, though I'm not familiar with that superhero. I need to familiarize myself with it because my 4-year-old boy loves them. Yeah, so I work for Han Family Wines. Can you guys see me?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, okay, all right. I work for Han Family Wines, and I've been there for about 9 years. And under my umbrella is the Smith and Hook label, which we will go over. I don't have a big full-blown PowerPoint, but I will get to the couple slides that I do have. Just to tell you a little bit about myself, though, I was born and raised right here in the Central Coast of California. In fact, I didn't go very far. I live currently in the same town I grew up in, little small King City, California. The salad bowl is what they call it, but really there's a lot of wine here too. I went to school at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and I studied wine and viticulture there. And I've worked in tasting rooms and custom crush facilities, all of which have led me to my job here at Han. And so let me share my screen. Oh boy. So the name Smith and Hook might be confusing because I work for Han Family Wines, but the names really pay homage to the families that had the property before Nicky Han purchased this land here in the Central Coast. The Smith and Hook families were horse and cattle ranchers. Like I said, that had this property before us. So this was a big ranch area, and Nicky Han found this place, and we have this little spot that we call Inspiration Point, where he stood and looked over this valley and said, I want to make wine here. And that was back in the early 80s, in which most of Central Coast was planted to, like Adam said, Cabernet Sauvignon. This specific spot, which is now the San Lucia Highlands, where Han is located, was planted to Cab. And it wasn't until years of making Cab that we found out that this particular microclimate didn't grow Cab well. You know, there was a lot of pyrazines in this specific appellation, and it took years and a lot of knowledge and viticulturists and grape growers to winemakers to really figure that out. So this specific spot was planted to Chardonnay and Pinot there. But that led the Smith and Hook label to search for other grape growing regions that had hotter climates and that were more suitable for Cab. You know, we wanted to keep this, and we knew it could be something big. So in turn, we searched high and low, and we didn't have to go far. As a crow flies, you know, we're probably 8 miles from the Arroyo Seiko appellation, which you can see is, so just to point out, Han, so this is Arroyo Seiko, and Han is probably located somewhere where my cursor is right here, a little bit inland. We're not too far from the coast, maybe 20 miles as a crow flies. But yeah, so to get into, you know, what makes this wine unique and all the different AVAs we source from. So I'll touch on that. And if there's any questions that come up, you know, we'll have time for that. But I'll start with the Arroyo Seiko appellation. This, like I said, not too far from Han, but it's sheltered by the wind. It's in this big dry riverbed, and this is really the source of the structure and backbone of the wine. We typically source about 20%, or what goes into the wine is about 20% of the final blend. And just so you know too, it's 100% Cabernet Sauvignon. I don't use any blenders just because we pull from all these different AVAs, which really speak to the Central Coast and the uniqueness of each of these AVAs. Moving south is the San Antonio Valley, and this is really a cool little gem. Not a lot of people know about this spot. It's really hot there. In fact, that's also where I grew up, Lockwood, California. And great soils, great well-drained soils. Also, there's no stress for water, so that's always a plus. But we source about 30% of the grapes from here that go into this cab. And really the temperatures here, what's so unique is there could be like a 50-degree temperature swing, 40 degrees in the morning and 80 at night, 90, or sorry, not at night, but during the day. So this really ensures a long growing season and fruit that's showcases a lot of plum and blackberry notes. It's always really easy to work with this specific AVA. A little bit further south is Haines Valley, very close to San Antonio Valley, so very similar, easy to work with, intense blackberry spice aromas. Yeah, very well-drained soils. Everything that's great for growing cab. Healthy canopies. And then furthest south, which Adam also talked about, which makes up the biggest portion of our blend, is Paso Robles. And Paso Robles itself is unique because there's about 11 different AVAs, or I'm sorry, districts within Paso. We source from 3 of them, but the consistency with Paso is just spectacular. It's very similar to San Antonio Valley in the 40 to 50 degree temperature swings, and ensuring a long growing season is really key, I find, in growing consistent, hardy, fruit-driven cab. So really easy to source from these areas. And it's my goal every year to be consistent in making this wine, but also if I can make it better each year, I strive for that. Paso, like I said, Paso's really easy to work with. A lot of great growers down there, a lot of family owned too, which we like, and brings forward a lot of those typical bright cherry notes, and really round tannins. So to get into a little bit of the winemaking techniques in this 100% cab, what's unique to this is every ounce of wine is barrel aged. So we tank ferment everything, with the exception of about 5% comes from some barrel ferment, which adds complexity and structure, and really will age the wine right off the bat. So I believe in February, we're going to be tasting the wines. And I think it's the 2017, which will be super fun because, 3 years in, and we'll really see some rounded tannins in this. So yes, everything, every ounce of wine is barrel aged. And, this I find really makes the wine complex right off the bat. It spends about 15 months in barrel, and providing us, complexity, round tannins, and really delivering some consistency too. Bringing forth fruit. About 40% of this is neutral barrel. I'm sorry, 60%. 60% is neutral, 40% is a combination of a few different oak regimens we use. So yeah, you can see, I mean, this wine is full bodied with lots of cherry notes. It's full of layers from, those bright cherry boysenberry to spice and soft vanilla, bursting with tannins in the finish. It's really a fun wine to work with, playing with all these different AVAs and really, showcasing the Central Coast and, not trying to be Napa or Sonoma, but, trying to be unique to what we are, which is fruit forward, fruit driven, round tannins, and we have such a great growing region, with all these different microclimates. I did skip a little blurb, so pardon me for that, but I did want to just mention that I know 2017 was a few years ago, but if you guys recall, in California, we had just come off of 5 years of a drought. So 2017 was like this really big season, and we had a lot of rain that year, which led to healthy canopies and typical, bud break in March, February-ish, but really gave the winemakers and viticulturists this hope, and fulfilling all these reservoirs and rivers and, just kind of giving us a breath of fresh air that we got rain. So it was a unique year in the sense that, we're coming off this drought and it was like this hallelujah. And we also saw, this huge heat spike that year. So something I wanted to point out was that a lot of things started to ripen. A lot of vineyards started to ripen right at the same time. And so winemakers were kind of in a panic of, oh shoot, we need to get things off the vine. But if you had the harvest equipment, if you had the space, which Han fortunately did, we were able to get everything off very quickly, just in the nick of time, making sure that everything was mature, seeds were brown, and didn't show any green characteristics. So that was something to point out about the 2017 vintage, that a lot of people.
Can I stop you there, Megan? Having just talked about the 17, I'm keeping half an eye on the time. Thanks very much for that. Can we go on to Robert talking about Oak Knoll and come back and pick up some of the points that you touched on there? And then we'll take some of the more general questions at the end, if that's okay.
Sure, not a problem.
Robert, can we go on to you?
Sure. Hello, everybody. Robert Donnell here with Trail 3150 right here. We're actually fortunate enough to have the owner of the vineyard on this Zoom today, Travis Vale from Vale Vineyard. So I think he's going to help me with the presentation, and if he can unmute himself, and we can kind of tag team this together.
Good morning, everybody, or good evening, as it may be. Can we all hear me? Just want to double check I pushed the right button.
I can hear you, Travis, no problem.
Perfect. My role here, I believe, is to give kind of
Hello?
the idea of what Trail 3150 is. And obviously, I'm the worst half to present it. A, I'm not English. And B, I'm not the better half of my wife and I's partnership in this brand. Everybody still there?
Yeah, we're
Yep.
fine.
Let's get on. So Catherine and I bought the property in 2010, or started to begin actually look at it in 2010, with the idea of a family home is primarily our main reason to have the vineyard. It's a great piece of property, a great creek. We've got rope swings, bike paths, great vineyards behind. We're right in front of William Hill. We're located directly on the Silverado Trail, a little bit on the south end of the valley in the Oak Knoll district. And it was Catherine's idea to build a small, I hate to use the word Opus One idea, but basically when we bought the winery, we bought the vineyard, it was already under contract. So we negotiated with Camus, we negotiated with Trinitros, we negotiated with all these buyers to get 1 ton of each of the varietals, which is the Cab, the Merlot, and the Malbec. At that point, we didn't really know how we were going to build the brand or what we were going to do with it. And again, it's Catherine's passion. I've got a couple other projects on my end. So we sourced that to Flora Springs for the creation of the wine. Basically, if you would have asked Catherine in 2016 what she was going to do with it, she was going to send it all to her family in England because she's got quite a large family, and it was just drinking wine. But once you realize what a couple thousand bottles does, you realize that you can't send it all away. So then the brand started to come together, the Trail 3150. The reason why it's called Trail 3150 is obviously that's our address on the Silverado in Napa Valley. And it's pretty much what you guys are tasting or what you'll be tasting is really just it's the infancy. It's the smallest, the unknown of what we were trying to do together. And I think it's important to represent that because Napa Valley is a pretty expensive place to live in the world. And it's really difficult to start a brand. And a lot of people try, and a lot of people succeed, and a lot of people fail. So while we think our wine's price point the right way, we think we have the pedigree as far as me being in the wine industry since I was 18. Catherine, her father was the brewmaster for Stella Artois. She's got brewery and alcohol beverage background. So we feel we have the pedigree, but we just really, to be honest with you, didn't really have the finances. And it took us a lot to get everything up and running. And I just kind of wanted to be on this Zoom call to express the passion of the wine and understand that it is infancy. It's not like Han or Seiko's and all the other that are hugely established. So when you taste 3150, what I ask is that you understand that it's young, not in flavor, but in just a mindset of what we were trying to do at that point. And Bobby can obviously explain about the TA, the terroir, and all that stuff. But I think, again, the reason why I wanted to be on this Zoom call was to express to you guys the passion behind it and what Catherine and I are trying to do.
Okay.
I'll pass it back over.
Yeah.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. Yeah, so thank you, Travis. That was huge to get a little background of the history of the purchase and the family and what kind of brought this Trail 3150 all together. So like Travis had touched on, this vineyard was originally planted in 1992, the fruit was purchased by Hess. And again, trying to figure out what we could do with the vineyard and the varietals that were given to us. For Oak Knoll, it is kind of the sweet spot in Napa Valley. It's right at the end of really the southern tip of Napa Valley. So the fog will come in through Carneros and kind of settle in. So it's a little bit cooler here. So we get a longer ripening, which will help develop the flavors that we want to have. So it just works well for what we want to grow there. But not knowing, like Travis had said, not knowing what we wanted to do with the vineyard, we harvested the Malbec, the Merlot, and the Cabernet Sauvignon differently. So over the course of September 22nd to October 11th, we basically harvested these 3 varietals and fermented them all separately, put it into different oak programs. 50% new French oak was paramount because we wanted that smooth, supple tannins. But then as we went along, we tasted the Cabernet, we tasted the Malbec, and tasted the Merlot, and we really figured out, they really married well together. So what would make ourselves kind of set apart from the vast amounts of Cabernet that's in Napa Valley was to come up with a unique kind of proprietary blend that would work well for us, showcase not only the vineyard, but showcase Napa Valley. And I think really with 2016 being our first, coming off of that drought, it really bode well for us. We really like those flavors together. And so we thought, heck, don't fix, what ain't broke, and keep moving forward with this blend. Although sometimes, the percentages may go up and down due to the yields and the vintage and things like that. We're always looking for that, the vineyard will always give us that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 kind of a blend. This map's probably a little hard to read, but, right here again, Napa Valley, here's the Napa proper. This is kind of where we are right here, and this is Sonoma County over here. So again, coastal influence, fog layer will come in and really kind of help with that ripening for us. Here's a little shot of the vineyard, the Vail family property. Like Travis was talking about, the house is situated up top. We got a lot of rope swings and things along the creek right here. The Merlot, the Malbec, and the Cabernet. So with the runoff right behind here is a mountain range, and right over here is a mountain range. So over time, you get all that rock and soil kind of coming down, really helping hold a little bit of the moisture in, but allow for a lot of drainage. So rock makes really good Cabernet. And so that drainage will help, not super soak the vines and get them super green and healthy and growing, but stress them a little bit to kind of give us that flavor and that richness that we want. And again, going back to why do we blend the Cabernet and the Merlot and the Malbec? It's kind of go to the old parent adage, you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. We looked at this, and this is what the vineyard has on it, was already planted on it whenever Catherine and Travis bought the property. So we decided to go with that and to see really without any kind of pretentiousness behind it with what really the ground and the soil would give us, and the blend worked really well together, and we're going to stay the course with that. While other wineries may purchase the grapes and put them into larger blends, or even make a straight Cabernet out of it, we decided the blend worked well for us. And going back to everybody's kind of point on this, the last slide here is about the Napa Valley total acreage over the course from 1999 to 2019. Obviously, you can see, like everybody has said before, Cab is king at 73.8%. So why is that? Again, to Travis's point, the land cost in Napa is it's very high, and basically Cabernet gives you the most bang for your buck. So if you're going to be a grower, that's going to be your focus. And then after that, of course, is a lot of the blenders with Merlot and Cab Franc. So with that, I think I'm with Travis, and I think we're close to our time. So I will get out of this and we can start answering some questions.
Robert, that's fantastic. Thank you very much, and very succinct. I've got one question which I'll kick off with. One theme when I was over in California 2 years ago was hillsides and mountain vineyards. This is probably a question more for the other two than you, Robert. When you're sourcing fruit, is that something you look for, or is it something you would look for if you're able to afford fruit from these hugely fashionable hillside and mountain vineyards?
Do you want me
Megan
to?
or Adam, let's take that. You have to unmute yourself, Adam.
I'm sorry, forgive me. What was the question, Keith?
One theme when I was over in California 2 years ago was the quality of fruit coming off some of the hillside and some of the mountain vineyards in particular.
Right.
Is that something you would look to do, or is the fruit just so expensive it's just not commercial, except at the very highest level?
To the Napa fruit that I work with, or just in general?
That particular session was based on Napa hillsides and mountains, but just generally.
You know, it really depends on the site. You know, Megan had pointed out we've got 11 sub-appellations in Paso Robles. Some are very hilly. It's often harder to farm, so therefore it's more expensive. It doesn't necessarily make it a better product. It really is site specific in that. But the vineyards that we work with primarily for the Cycles Gladiator cab you have, they're on what we call mesas. We have what's called, oddly enough, the J. Lohr Mesa that we work with, the Justin Mesa. They're all named for various wineries that pull their grapes out of these particular areas. And they're up at elevation, and then they're like a tabletop. So they get full sun exposure. We do have some southerly facing hills. And I'm usually willing to pay more for that particular fruit because it just, you get better expression of flavors, obviously more resolved tannins in the wine, bigger flavors, more color. Again, it's, you know, not necessarily about, I was weighing in on a chat conversation about alcohols earlier, and it's not always about the most intense wine you can make or the highest alcohol wine you can make anymore. It's about a lot of finesse. And I think when you get the luxury of working with some of the hillside stuff, you have that ability to be able to, you know, finesse the wines in the winery to be able to get the maximum amount of expression without making it an overblown wine. So that's my thought on it.
Okay, thanks for that. Megan, would you have anything to add to that?
I would just say, you know, in choosing vineyards, it's sometimes trial and error. And, you know, you really don't want to dive right in if you're not going to get good quality. So it's not, you have to look at the big picture, the soils, the climate, the growers, the canopy health. You got to look at everything. So I would say, you know, trialing it could be something to take on, but it's really site and vineyard specific with all those encompassing layers to it.
Okay, thank you. Adam, I just saw you put a notice up suggesting a question I might ask, but I can't see the question. So would you like to ask it and then try and answer it?
Oh yeah, Nick had asked a question about the horrendous fires that we've had.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Supply and the market and all of that stuff. And so I've written a few articles on it, as well as some internal stuff on the fires, if anyone's interested. Yes, we had, as I'm sure everybody knows, we had horrendous fires. And we were not the only ones. I mean, we were impacted. We have a large program out of Oregon, the Willamette Valley, which was hammered pretty badly. A lot like parts of Napa and Sonoma. And oddly enough, obviously Monterey, I'm sure Megan can tell you all about that. And down in the Edna Valley near where we are, and we've learned a lot about fire and smoke taint and how it impacts. It's not necessarily how much exposure to the smoke, it's how close to the source of the fire. Because a lot of the components are readily oxidized and become non-volatile after a period of time, the farther they are. And we've even learned that even the smoke taint components hanging on the grape, the longer you let the grapes hang without picking, the more inert these chemicals come. So we're learning a lot about it as we speak. I'm working with some people out of Oregon State University who are identifying things. Now, as far as supply and demand and the market, a lot of places did not harvest. In particular, the big guys, Constellation came through and pretty much refused to pick virtually anything out of California. You know, just fear. I'm making wines again, like I said, all over California, and there's some that have been impacted. Paso Robles saw a lot of smoke, but very, very, very little smoke taint. Edna Valley, on the other hand, got hammered because there was a fire off to the coast that came around the other side of Monterey and came into Edna Valley. And so what happened is the bulk wine market went through the roof overnight as people started to realize that a number of their vineyards that they work with in Napa in particular, and in Sonoma and Monterey weren't going to become available or going to be unusable. The market for both grapes probably went up. I think the price of grapes went up between 50 and 100% within about 2 short weeks in September. And the bulk wine market, where we have some programs at our company, the Wine Hooligans, we do a bunch of club and direct fulfillment wines that have to be very, very inexpensive. And, wines we might be getting for maybe $8 or $9 a gallon, all of a sudden are now $18 to $20 a gallon. And we're having to lean more heavily on imported wines now. We do a lot of work with Chile and South Africa and France and Italy. So those are actually the bargains now. So it's going to be interesting to see how this fleshes out. I think you're going to see less deals because people are a lot shorter. We again weighted heavily in Paso Robles, which was not affected that much. So I think we're in pretty good shape, but I can't speak for everybody else on here. We have some Napa lots that we work with, which have a little bit of smoke taint to it, but I'm still waiting for some new analysis to come out to really see how impacted it's going to be.
Okay, Robert, would you have any comments on that being Sonoma based?
Yes, I would say some growers that I work with were definitely impacted as far as the smoke goes. Fortunately, Travis and I were really proactive in our vineyard at the Trail 3150 and took early berry samples to make sure that we weren't impacted by the smoke, and being lower down in the valley, we seem to be less affected as some of our neighbors. So, the numbers that have come back for us have been very not positive, but negative. We don't have any. There hasn't been any smoke taint kind of revealed in our vineyard specifically. But yes, I mean it was a tragic year. There's no way of skirting that issue with a lot of the other growers that are out there. We got a big hit here in Sonoma County. Not only because of maybe the larger, to Adam's point, not the larger brands not wanting to pick, maybe to get out of contract, but also just because of the infected by the fire. I have friends of mine that vineyards actually burned and tractors melted, and so it was devastating. But I think this is something, as hopefully my other winemakers will agree, this is hopefully going to be a big learning year for us. I mean, for California, unless things change, I don't see the fire stopping. So we're going to have to really learn from this.
Yeah, and if I can weigh in just to add to what Robert said, he actually brought up a pretty good point. And I want to hammer home this point because you're going to be hearing a lot about this in the press, and you have heard a lot about it in the press. A lot of these companies that have come out and said that they weren't picking because quality was an issue for them. I want to remind everybody that 2018 was the largest year we've ever had in California. And many of these same companies, their marketing departments are coming out and saying, we don't want to really, release any smoke taint wines or any quality issue. These are wineries that were already looking to get out of contracts. We're selling a ton of their bulk wine before the fires ever hit. So I think for a lot of us, we recognized that was probably an excuse to get out of some contracts, because we work with some oak knoll fruit too, and we saw the same thing, virtually no problems at all with any of that stuff. So I don't know why people were leaving it hanging on the vine, other than the fact they just had too much 2018 in barrel, and they're still sitting on older vintages that they're trying to sell. So I would take anything you hear about quality with a grain of salt at this point.
Yeah, thank you for being as forthright as ever, Adam. Liz, Andrea, how are we doing for time? We had said 10:02 and we're just beyond. Have we got time for a couple more questions?
Absolutely, yes. No, go ahead. We've got till about another 5 or so minutes. That's fine.
Okay. Please put questions forward to any of the winemakers. Okay. If there's none forthcoming, I was wondering, has Merlot recovered from sideways, or will it never be any more than a good blend in a top end production?
We're seeing a positive trend. How about that? It's not great, and it may never get up to where it is. It's still my favorite variety. I love Merlot. What it has done, the movie was a blessing in disguise. It actually helped increase the quality of Merlot, because all of the really bad Merlot that was way overplanted, and I would argue that there's far fewer places in California that grow good Merlot than Pinot Noir. All of those growers ripped out their bad Merlot to plant bad Pinot Noir. And the people that always had the best Merlot in the ground, some of the places up in Napa, up the hillsides, Carneros, Sonoma Coast, places in Santa Barbara, even some places in Monterey, kept their Merlot in the ground, ultimately knowing that the grape would come back around. So you don't see a lot of Merlot in the ground anymore, but you do see better quality Merlot, and I think the bottles show it.
Yeah, I'll echo what Adam was saying on that. I mean, one of my first mentors was Tom Rinaldi with Duckhorn, and I think that we've made some epic Merlot, and I always enjoy Merlot from St. Helena down to Carneros. I mean, it just the range of fruit and spice and peppers that it can give you is amazing, and it broke my heart to see some programs of Merlot kind of fade away, but it always is a great varietal and a great vineyard and provides so much to wine.
I think we're at a 4% increase over last year, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, Megan, I know you use Merlot in your proprietary blend under the Smith & Hook label. Do you want to comment on why you use Merlot as well?
It's a great base in which I can build, this great red blend, adding Malbec and Petit Syrah, a little bit of Cab on top of it. I think it's just a wonderful base wine in which, you do see a lot of fruit-driven characteristics. You do see a lot of spice. And if you can work with Merlot to make it, a fine wine, then you're doing all right. I think it's lovely. I think it's just a persona that, just kind of has a bad name, to a lot of, it's a lot of people in the wine industry, and it's really a unique varietal. I think it's just fine.
Yeah. Okay.
Should get more press.
Is there an area within California which will be the next big area for Cabernet?
Ooh.
Well, it's still going in the ground here in Paso. We find that there are places that are unsuitable for the grape, and then there are places that are too cool for the grape here. It's a lot like Monterey, where it's too cold to grow grapes up the north end, and it's too hot to grow grapes on the south end. You just got to find that sweet spot where it is. I don't know of any new appellations outside of some stuff outside of San Diego, but I wouldn't say that's for quality grape growing. But I don't know. I think Napa is still king. Parts of Sonoma and Paso's trying to get there.
Keith, Nick was saying about the climate affecting picking times, as we're talking about sort of the warmth of the certain areas. Are the warmer climates affecting picking times?
Yeah, well, I mean, that's in a whole different seminar we could discuss about, how climate change is changing all of our viticultural practices. But, we're learning, someone had asked a question in the chat about viticultural practices coming along slower than winemaking practices as far as technology and advancements. And I think we're learning how to get grapes riper, or not riper, but fully mature at lower sugars now, as we're learning about what to grow, where to grow, site-specific science, trellising techniques. There's a lot that, everyone's moving towards these, biodynamic, organic, sustainable practices. We're finding that it's actually, better in the long run for the vines. We're actually able to coax full maturity at an earlier time in the harvest season. Where it is still warmer. Normally we get this period where it gets really, really hot throughout California towards the end of August, beginning of September, and then it cools right back down again. Sugars drop. We're able to let the hang. That's what happened in 2018 when we had just that really phenomenal year, quality-wise and crop size-wise. But where it used to be, where we were always striving for these ripe flavors, and so we'd have to hang them for a much longer period of time. But with the heat getting progressively hotter, this year it didn't cool down until, God, like 3 weeks ago, I think. And so it was an odd year. So I think it's forcing us to look at viticultural practices differently and changing the way we approach stuff. It is getting hotter, and we just have to deal with it. And but there are things that we can do in the vineyard to mitigate any of the problems associated with really high temperatures.
So I think the one good thing though is the less risk of Mr. Frost.
Agreed. No, we saw that too, Napa and definitely over in Sonoma County. When looking back at my notes from last year, I think I picked it 10 to 12 days earlier, a lot of the vineyards this year than I did the year before. So again, nature of rain and weather and heat, it kind of accompanies all those. But I think we as winemakers, we try to make the best decisions we can out of the vineyards that are out there, and a lot of the vineyard teams will want us out of the vineyard so they can do their job and grow the grapes. But it's a nice relationship that we seem to dance together that well.
If I can just say thank you very much to those who joined us from California, particularly those who had to get up so early in the morning. Lots of fascinating stuff there. Thanks very much. And thank you, the Circle of Wine Writers, for taking an hour out to sit and listen to California and Cabernet. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well,